Hello, this is Aaron Wissner from Michigan. I'm on the line with Nicole Foss of New Zealand. It is November the 16th, 2020 in the US, and it is the 17th in New Zealand. Today, we will be talking most likely about the US presidential election and the transition from the Trump White House to the Biden White House. Nicole, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well, but it has been quite something over the last couple of weeks, watching the emotional whipsaw all over the place, watching the attempted coup, which was absolutely going to happen. And it still isn't 100% clear where things are going with that. So it's still a question of watch this space. This isn't finished. It should be, but it isn't. So this is going to be a very challenging time between now and January 20th.
And yeah, there's been a lot of excitement in the news as far as the Trump lawyers have been attempting to make things happen in different states. Here in Michigan, there have been various lawsuits. In fact, I'm in the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan right now, where one of the major lawsuits is trying to stop the vote count from being certified in Michigan. And the lawyers, or the court, on the east side, west side of Michigan here, is kind of right-leaning. So it's interesting to see whether the case will be dismissed or whether it will be, what will happen with it.
I think so far the Trump legal cases are about 1 for 16. So he's losing all of them. Every one of them is frivolous. Every one of them is a complete waste of the court's time. His own lawyers know that. And when asked by the judge if they actually have any evidence, they admit no. So there's an absolutely massive disconnect between the public messaging and what the lawyers are actually doing in court. The lawyers are being laughed out of court absolutely everywhere. There is no legal merit to any of these cases whatsoever. The only case that they can count as a kind of win was the one where they managed to get a judge to say that the Republican observers had to be able to be 6 feet away from the counting instead of 20 feet. That was the only win. It makes absolutely no difference to anything. This is being laughed out of court. Left-wing courts, right-wing courts, it doesn't matter. There is no evidence it's being laughed out of court. So in terms of the legality of this, there is absolutely no question. It's massively illegal. He is just trying it on. This is an attempted coup. This is exactly what I said he was going to do before the election. I said Biden is going to win and Trump is going to attempt a coup. That's exactly what is happening. So what Trump is doing what he always does, come out and try and state reality is what he wants it to be and just wait for everybody else to fall in line. That's exactly what he's always done. He doesn't speak the truth ever. He speaks what he wants to be the truth and then expects everyone else to simply bend the knee. And some of them are. But this is really interesting because there's a huge split in Republicanism at the moment. So he has lost a lot of the donor class. He has lost Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch is going to kick Trump's ass. Rupert Murdoch has so much more power than Trump. It is unreal. So Fox News, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, all these are Murdoch papers. All of them have pivoted to being unflattering to Trump. So he's lost very powerful people, not because they didn't want a Republican administration, but because they didn't want Trump because he's an absolute agent of chaos with no ideology whatsoever. So he's not on their side, and they know it. He's just on his own side for personal profit. And they used him as a distraction.
And now it seems
they used him as a distraction for as long as they could, but now they have to dump him because he's such an agent of chaos that he will turn on them and destroy them too, and they know it.
And now it seems that Trump has, since Fox News is not supporting him, he's switching to really fringe, right-wing kind of fascist-leaning news media like
One
the
American
Epoch,
News Network.
yeah, One American News Network and Newsmax and the Epoch Times, and
Yep.
I've mentioned Zero Hedge before. They
Mm.
echo a lot of that stuff, and
Yeah, they do,
Limbaugh,
unfortunately.
Rush Limbaugh, and what's the Alex Jones's
Yep.
InfoWars.
InfoWars. All of them are pushing this. Trump has come out and absolutely claimed in all caps that he has won the election. It's obvious he has lost. He called a 306 votes in the Electoral College a landslide when that's what he got. Now that's what Biden has, and he's saying that it's fake. This is just what he does. Narcissists will never accept a loss. Absolutely never. They cannot psychologically cope with the destruction of the persona that they put out into the public. To have the veil stripped away and for people to see behind the persona to the weak, pathetic person behind it, freaking evil person behind it, they absolutely cannot cope with this psychologically. So they will do anything to prevent that happening, anything.
And yet many people are they really honestly think that either he won or that the election is being stolen from him. And
they think that because that's what he's telling them.
Well, and
he's conditioned them to believe everything he says, whether it's true or not. And it's not true.
Well, and the thing that I noticed today was apparently there's some attorney who worked for federal courts or something, and she's claiming that these Dominion vote counting machines have
Sidney Powell, I believe, the lawyer is.
That's the one. And it seems like that was.
She's the one who was trying to get Michael Flynn off for betraying his country. So yes, she's a pretty piece of work as well herself.
So I don't understand.
She should be disbarred.
Was that? So is this consistent with what she was doing with Flynn?
Well, she's just trying to get another Trump term. She's trying to engineer fascism. So yes, she's trying to do that by getting Michael Flynn off for having betrayed his country, for being an unregistered FARA agent, for just umpteen felonies.
Now you'll have to refresh me on Michael Flynn. So
Michael Flynn was convicted
good guy
for
or a bad guy?
Oh, he's a horrific guy. He has been a foreign agent of Turkey for a very long time, unregistered foreign agent, which is a felony. So he was trying to get a particular cleric in Turkey sent back to Turkey to be executed. Fatih Gala? I can't remember the exact name. My Turkish is pathetic, but or non-existent, shall we say. But he was trying to get this cleric extradited from Turkey. The cleric lives in the US, trying to get that to happen on behalf of Turkey. He was trying to get the Halk Bank case, which is a Turkish bank, thrown out of court. That is another case of dark money undermining democracy in all sorts of ways. So Flynn has been trying to act as an agent of Turkey for a long time, and he's had his finger in every dirty pie you could possibly imagine. He's now QAnon as well. He's publicly taken an oath to QAnon. So he is a lunatic, and an evil lunatic at that.
So
Sidney the people Powell, who are defending Sidney Powell is defending him. She should be disbarred for her actions in this case. They manufactured evidence. They altered text messages, put incorrect dates on them, and submitted them into evidence. This is a felony. She should lose her law license permanently for this. Every one of Trump's legal team should lose their law licenses. This is the biggest abuse of the rule of law that has ever been in the United States. And people don't understand this because Trump is just going out there and steamrolling the truth, exactly the way he always does, trying to create doubt, and a whole lot of people who are really low information and don't understand what on earth is going on are just swallowing it hook, line, and sinker. And they're voting for fascism.
Well, and the fascist media is kind of eating up Powell's story right now, right? Because OA
good drama.
And Limbaugh had her on today, apparently. But it's all these, if you look at the media bias chart, these are like as far right as you can go. Absolutely. And as low fact as you can go.
Yeah, exactly. They are trying to create a completely false impression and steamroller it over the truth. That's what they've been doing for 4 years, and it's absolutely what they're doing now. And they are all reinforcing each other. So Kayleigh McEnany is coming out and saying, well, there'll be a second Trump term. Mike Pompeo is busy in the Middle East talking about second Trump terms. They're all doing this. And this is what matters. So it's not just what Trump says, it's whether people accept it. He cannot do this alone. But if enough of the right people stand with him, then he can do this. But the question is, are they going to? I still think on balance at this point, no. I think because he's lost the powerful people with all the money, people like Rupert Murdoch, who can undermine him through the media in every conceivable way, I think he's not going to make this happen. But what he is going to do is usher in absolute chaos deliberately. So what happens when you strip away a narcissist's persona, when you reveal them to the world for what they really are and they cannot stand it, this is called narcissistic injury. The response to that is narcissistic rage, and narcissistic rage is annihilatory rage. He is going to try to destroy your country because it rejected him. That's what narcissists do. So he's trying to create absolute chaos by telling his supporters that he won, encouraging them to come out and riot and wreck things and hurt people. So that's one strategy. He's ordered massive troop withdrawals from Afghanistan, Syria, places like that. This is not to bring the soldiers home and stop wars. This is a couple of things. This is to wrong foot the military by causing a massive logistical nightmare on short notice that they have to organize. So the military hates that sort of thing. But he hates the military because the military voted against him by 4-1 because he called them suckers and losers. Like, he literally went to Arlington Cemetery and called fallen soldiers suckers and losers. You don't win the military vote when you do that. So he's trying to sideline the military, trying to screw them up in every way he possibly can. He's been attacking the chain of command for 4 years. So
well,
he's been trying to
fire his own Secretary of Defense.
Yes, he did.
His own Secretary of Defense.
Yes, because Esper wouldn't allow him to use the military domestically. So Esper was not as much of a yes man as people thought, but he has paid the price for not being a yes man. The people he's put in at the Pentagon are unbelievable. Ezra Cohen Watkins, there's a reasonable argument that he is E on the QAnon network. So they've put a major QAnon operative in charge of intelligence at the Pentagon. This is just a way to access all kinds of information and feed it to bad actors. So this is another way that he's trying to destroy the country. Your national security is gone, like literally none. National security in the U.S. is toast because he's probably been selling state secrets for 4 years. He's certainly going to sell them now. He's going to take every bit of classified intel he possibly can and sell it to the people who will use it to hurt the United States the most. That's what narcissists do. He's trying to destroy the military because it has a code of honor. And he doesn't have a code of honor. He doesn't even understand what honor even means. So when he was standing with John Kelly at John Kelly's son's grave, he said, I don't understand. What was in it for them? What's in it for him? Like, why would he go serve? That's stupid. And to say that to a Marine general next to his son's grave? He has no respect for the military whatsoever. Absolutely none. So he's trying to supplant them with people who are loyal to him personally. These people are Eric Prince's mercenaries, paid for by the UAE, so that there's no loyalty to the states whatsoever. They're nothing to do with the states. They're not even necessarily loyal to Trump. It's not that Trump is going to be commanding forces in these places. It's that he's trying to create chaos by sending in a bunch of bad actor mercenaries to just create a complete shit show in the Middle East. You know, people like Pompeo are evangelicals. A conflagration in the Middle East is a precondition for the rapture. They want war in the Middle East. They want chaos. They're just absolute agents of chaos. They're trying to destroy anything that involves any element of service or honor or integrity, to make all of those look so bad that nobody even believes in integrity or truth or anything like that anymore. Because if you can create a situation where nobody believes anybody is telling the truth or has integrity, then you just ignore them all, or you just pick the one you happen to like the best. But there's no sense of truth, no sense of trying to do anything that's better for anybody. It's just a complete, let's create as much chaos as possible for the sake of it, to hurt as many people as possible. Because that's what he's going to do. On the way out the door, he will hurt as many people as possible. He's going to kill the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, throw 20+ million people off their health care in the middle of a pandemic, and then make sure that now they all have pre-existing conditions, so they're not eligible for health care anymore. He talks about making people, protecting people with pre-existing conditions, but he's just lying. There's no way that's going to happen under anything that he has the ability to control. So once he's thrown out the Affordable Care Act, there will be no protection for existing conditions. Even when Biden comes in, is he going to pass that again with no Senate support? No, absolutely not. There will be nothing he can do. So what I think has happened is, I think there actually was fraud in this election, although most of the people who are observing it think that there isn't. I think there is, but not in the way that the Trump campaign is alleging. I think it is voter machine fraud, but it's not Dominion, it's ES&S. Now, there are 3 companies, I believe, that work with voting machines. The 2 big ones are ES&S and Dominion. It used to be almost all ES&S. Dominion was allowed to get a look in because there was a sense that ES&S had too much of a monopoly, and this was a problem. And ES&S makes huge donations to the GOP all the time. So ES&S is Republican controlled. Dominion has elements of both. It's bipartisan, so it's not biased. So of course, when they go after voting machine fraud, they go after Dominion, because that's the one they want to get rid of in order to make it ES&S across the board, so that they can fiddle it whenever they want. Personally, I think that's how Trump lost and the down ballot tickets won for the Republicans. Look at people like Mitch McConnell's approval ratings. He hasn't cracked 30% for years, but he won. How did he do that? He fiddled it, I'm sure. No one can prove it, but I'm sure that's what happened. But because no one can prove it, there's nothing you can actually do about it. But this attack on the voting machines is incredibly cynical. I mean, they know that they have the potential to fiddle voting machines. They're connected to the internet. They're hackable. An 11-year-old hacked a Florida voting machine in 10 minutes a few years ago. It's just ridiculous. There is no election security. So what they really need to have a secure election is 100% hand-marked ballots that can be recounted and that are fully accountable. But with a lot of these voting machines, like the ones in Georgia, you press a button for a particular candidate and it will give you a printout with a QR code and a name. It's the QR code that's definitive, and you can't read it. Then it may not be the same as the name, and you have no way to verify that. And there is no way to deal with that in a recount either, because those machines leave no trail. They are it's completely impossible to go back and reassess everything that went through those machines. So I do think this election has major elements of fraud, but I think they're all on the GOP side. There's nothing anyone can do about it because no one can prove any of it. But what it means is that Biden is dealing with a hostile Senate. He will not be able to even choose his own cabinet. He will not be able to put through any of a Democratic agenda, not one single thing. When Barack Obama was elected, McConnell told his caucus, we will stop everything he tries to do. It doesn't matter whether we agree with it or not. If he proposed it, we are against it, and we will stop it happening. And that's exactly what they did. Then he had to use executive orders. Then they accused him of executive overreach for using executive orders rather than going through legislation. But the only reason he was doing that was because they had prevented legislation. So
now, what about this?
So much cynical stuff going on here.
What about this Georgia Senate race? Both of the senators for Georgia are being elected?
They're both into runoffs. So neither of them has been elected because neither of them got 50%. There were more than 2 candidates in both those races. So neither of the nobody got 50%. So there's now a runoff, January 5th. So that's Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. Both of them are crooks. They are both massive insider traders. As soon as they heard about COVID, they went out and sold certain stocks, bought other ones, made huge amounts of money. Kelly Loeffler's husband owns the New York Stock Exchange. They have more money than God, and she's somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan. She is a horrible, horrible person. So is David Perdue. Both of them richly deserve to lose. But it's a special election in Georgia in January. The odds are not good for Democrats under those circumstances. If you look at the data.
If they're that far right, it seems like it would be possible for the Democratic candidates to kind of move into the center to pull some of those possibly undecided votes.
I don't think that would really help at this point. I think the 2 candidates that they're running, especially Jon Ossoff, are awesome exactly the way they are. The debate between David Perdue and Jon Ossoff was one for the ages. Ossoff destroyed him. Perdue refuses to debate him ever again because Ossoff just dragged him through the mud for everything he's done. And all of it was true. So Ossoff and Raphael Warnock absolutely deserve to win those Senate races. Whether or not they will is hard to say. The odds are not good for those circumstances, but they have Stacey Abrams, and she's their secret weapon. Stacey Abrams is what gave Georgia to the Democrats in the first place. She registered nearly 1 million Democratic voters in the years since she lost the race, the fraudulent race for the governorship, because Brian Kemp, who won, was Secretary of State during the election, and he just purged all sorts of her voters off the rolls. He stole the election from her to become Georgia governor, but she decided after that not to run for Senate herself, but to build a Democratic base in Georgia. And that's exactly what has delivered Georgia to the Democrats at the moment in the presidential race. But we don't know yet whether that will translate to success in the Senate races. Fingers crossed that it will, because the 2 challengers absolutely deserve to win. And the 2 incumbents not only deserve to lose, they deserve to go to jail. So with any luck, that's exactly what will happen. Probably they won't go to jail because they're too rich, and rich people never do. But still, they deserve to lose at the very least.
What do you think is going to happen with that recount of the ballots and the hand recount in Georgia?
Nothing will change. The margins are just too big. There is no way. They do not overturn margins like that on recounts. Not ever. That's why they're attacking the voting machines now. They're also dropping a lot of the legal cases because they know that it's not going anywhere. So many of them have been thrown out. They're still saying they're taking these legal cases, but they're not. The law firms are deserting them because the law firms are finding they're losing all their other clients for taking these frivolous suits. So 2 of their law firms have deserted them already. They're dropping the cases right, left, and center. Now the next strategy is to go after the voting machines. They're not going to be able to prove that unless they are the ones who set up the fraud in the first place, and then they can pull out the evidence, which is possible. Who knows? They might manufacture something. I have no idea. I'm purely speculating there. The other thing they're going for is the Faithless Elector strategy. They've been trying to get whole states' results thrown out, particularly Pennsylvania. They're trying to say, because the observers were 20 feet away instead of 6 feet away, 600,000 ballots in Pennsylvania should be discounted, or the whole state's results thrown out, and then the legislature, which is conveniently Republican, gets to pick its own slate of electors, which would be Republican. So he's trying to prevent the confirmation of Biden at this point. So December 8th, the electors are chosen. December 14th, they vote. These are critical dates to be aware of. He's trying to disrupt things to the point where he can prevent 270 in the Electoral College. So if he can knock states off by saying, you can set your own slate of electors, just completely disregard the results of the election and nominate a slate of electors that will vote for me. That's what he's trying. Probably won't work. But the other thing he can do is try and just create so much chaos that you can't seat the electors in the Electoral College at all. So you can't vote for something in the middle of an insurrection, which is the next step. So he has so many ways in which he is trying to disrupt this and trying to steal the election. And an awful lot of his party are standing with him. So the Republicans are split on this. His supporters are rabidly in favor of him. His party is still terrified of him, but he's lost the donor class, the powerful people. So on balance, you would say, well, the powerful people are going to get their way. But if there's massive street violence in the meantime, then that could cause problems. So there's still too much uncertainty to be able to conclusively say what's going to come out of this. But in general terms, I would say Biden has decisively won. He absolutely should be inaugurated on January 20th. He'll be lucky to get 2 years in power with a hostile Senate, which means he will not be able to choose his own cabinet or impose his agenda. What this means is they will lose the House in 2022. Then it'll be a hostile House and Senate, and good luck getting anything done whatsoever. Then he loses the next election because everyone says, see, when you elect a Democrat, they can't do anything. This is the way Republicans set things up. They're absolutely obstructionist in Congress all the time, not for pushing anything of their own agenda, but just to prevent Democrats having any successes, because they do not consider Democrats to be legitimate even when they win. They will do everything to undermine a Democratic agenda. And the Democratic Party has not done itself any favors over the last while. They've bickered amongst themselves. They have completely and utterly failed to hold Trump to account, even although they had powers to do exactly that. They chose not to use them. Pelosi had to be forced to impeach him. She should have impeached him for far earlier and for far more crimes. There was no discussion of all the things that he has done in power. Only that one very narrow issue was debated, and most ordinary people thought, well, why would I care about phone calls with another president anyway? That wasn't something that affected them. They should have impeached him over the things that mattered to Americans, and they didn't. The Democrats absolutely dropped the ball on this, and they bickered and argued and conducted purity tests and went down stupid messaging. Like who says defund the police? That is the most election-losing slogan you could possibly come up with. And it isn't even what they meant, which is so sad. They didn't mean defund the police and throw the police out, that the police are all horrible and bad. That's not what they were trying to say. They were trying to say, well, you know, the police seem to get sent into an awful lot of situations where they're not trained to de-escalate things. You wouldn't want to send the police in there. You want to send in a social worker or a psychiatrist or something like that. You want to bring these people down, de-escalate the situation. So we should be looking at law enforcement in terms of where the funding should go to achieve the best outcomes. And the best outcome is sharing that funding between the police, the people who go in there with guns, and the people who go in there with words and try and make a situation not have to resort to guns. So when they were saying defund the police, all they meant was share the funding with other agencies who are able to do things that the police are not trained for and don't even want to be doing in the first place. The police don't want to be the ones who were called on to deal with all these situations. They want to hand that task over to other people, because police officers who know what good policing is know that you don't go and taser a mentally ill person having a meltdown, that doesn't help anything. So the way they put it was so terrible. The messaging just turned people off absolutely right, left, and center. And that was tragic.
Now, assuming that Biden is properly inaugurated on the 20th of January, there are these stories that Trump is going to try to start his own cable news channel,
yes,
network or something. I mean, what is that realistic, or what do you think he might end up doing, him and his families and his supporters? I mean, he has millions of people that are part of his cult of personality.
Yep. Well, if he is allowed to remain free in the United States, which he absolutely should not be, but if he is, he will start his own media network. He will try and foment unrest on well, I'm not sure how they call it. It's spelled parlor. It should be pronounced parler because it's French, means to speak, but I'm assuming they pronounce it parlor, so I will mispronounce it that way too. But they're fomenting a coup on Parler right now. The right-wing batshittery on Parler is absolutely insane. And this is where they're all going to go and foment their coup under the radar where no one else will see what they're plotting. So I suggest that people look in at Parler and see what's actually going on, because people really need to know what's going on there. And by the way, you can impersonate anyone else on Parler. You can call your account whatever you want. You can pretend to be someone else. So the potential for horrific things happening as a result of that, just causing massive confusion, is huge. So yes, he will do that.
This is like a Twitter then,
It's like Twitter, yes. And it's a Russian operation. So there was a really interesting story. I forget which paper it was in. I posted it on Facebook, but someone had done a really deep dive into the origins of Parler, looking at this tech guy, this American tech guy, who happened to cross paths with this Russian girl on vacation, who just happened to be able to set him up with all the means and the funding to set up this alternative Twitter. So this is a Russian psyop, yet another one. But this is incredibly dangerous. So he will set up his own media network. Either he'll buy One American News Network or one of the competitors like that, or he'll set up something on his own. He'll probably bring over Hannity and Ingraham and various people from Fox News, because Fox News is turning against him. He will poach the people from Fox News who are still on his side, and then Fox News will go on to be something rather different, because Murdoch has decided that's the way it's going to be. So yes, he will do that, but it depends whether or not anyone actually manages to impose any kind of accountability. Because what should happen the day after the inauguration or the day of the inauguration is he should be arrested and his passport should be confiscated, and he should be in custody without bail, because he is a flight risk. Give him a chance. If he thinks he's going to be arrested, he'll be on the next flight to the UAE. Very, very soon. The UAE has been bailing him out right, left, and center. So Saudi Arabia. He's taken sides in the Muslim schism on the side of the Sunnis. He's given them massive amounts of armaments. They've given him massive amounts of money. It's all tied in with Eric Prince, brother of Betsy DeVos. They're both billionaires. Eric Prince runs the mercenary side of things. He's living in the UAE. It's all tied together. So if Trump thinks he's going to face accountability, he leaves the country.
And I'd point out.
Pardon, sir?
Both from Michigan, I would point out, Grand Rapids.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And very much connected to the Koch brothers and all the donor class, the funding mechanisms, the Mercers. They're the ones who connected these people with Trump in the first place, looking to Trump to bulldoze his way into one-party minority rule on a permanent basis. So Trump was, people fell in line behind Trump when they saw that he was going to be such an effective distraction that they were going to be able to push through all kinds of things that no one would ever have voted for. So even although he was a horrible person and they knew it, they knew that they could achieve their goals by putting him in power for 4 years. But now he's a threat to them too, because now he has this cult of personality loyal to him personally that have nothing to do with them. So now they have to put him down. And that's exactly what they're going to try and do. But they've created a monster, and putting him down is now not going to be as easy as they thought it was going to be. And the whole country is going to pay the price. So even although he's lost the election, remember I said if he wins the election, you won't recognize your own country? Well, he's lost the election, and you probably still won't recognize your own country in a couple of years, which is so sad. And the problem is, moving into psychology of contraction, shit happens, and it's going to happen all over the place. And it won't stop happening until you reach some kind of bottom. So this is reminding me of Yugoslavia in the 1990s, where people who lived in the same country and kids went to the same schools and were neighbors, it took them 8 years to go from hosting the Winter Olympics as a civilized country to shooting each other's children in the streets. The veneer of civilization is very thin, and that's what happens when you balkanize it. And that's exactly what Trump has done for the last 4 years. So it's just a question of, has he done enough to cause the kind of chaos that suggests? It's entirely possible that he has. It's not guaranteed at this point, because he is going to go down. He is going to be humiliated in the process. Some of his followers are going to see, oh, maybe he was weak after all. Weakness is what they hate. That's why he's fighting. He's fighting in face of impossible odds, because he knows his supporters hate weakness. And you cannot admit to weakness and loss, no matter what the evidence is. that you're facing. So he's going to go down fighting, but he's going to be humiliated in the end. And there are people already who are thinking, he seems to be whining an awful lot. I mean, he's a terribly sore loser. So this is peeling off some of his supporters. It just depends how many. Is it going to be a critical mass? Is it not? We don't know. So there are still a lot of things that are not known, but the 65 days or thereabouts between now and the inauguration are going to be the most dangerous time probably, well, certainly in the lives of every American living today. Maybe not in all of American history, but this is going to be the biggest shit show Americans have ever seen domestically. Americans have been involved in a lot of shit shows abroad, but they've never had one at home. This is going to be the first. And it's going to suck. And it's going to happen at the same time as a massive COVID wave. So this is another thing he's been doing to try and leave Biden in the worst possible position. He's been doing these rallies, telling people not to wear masks deliberately to spread this as far as possible, to create the most unmanageable situation possible so that Biden ends up landing in everything.
On purpose? You think he's doing it on
absolutely.
Purpose?
There's no question
like in his mind, he's thinking, oh, we should make sure more people are infected so it's a mess after the election?
Yes. I'm not kidding. I'm not even exaggerating. This is what narcissists do. When you reject them, they will destroy you if they can. Oh, I know it is. But read up on malignant narcissism, what it actually means. We're talking the worst of the worst people in human history. Hitler and Stalin and like every horrible, disgusting dictator who committed grotesque crimes against humanity. This is the exact same psychology. The only difference between them and Trump is that Trump is also completely pathetic and self-sabotaging because he hasn't got the discipline to be a proper dictator. So he has all the psychology. He has all the ability to do things that are that awful, but he doesn't have the self-discipline to prevent sabotaging himself. So he does things like telegraph what he's going to do so that people have time to come up with plans to work around it. So he told everyone, basically let it be known that he was going to wreck the post office. So everybody voted months and months early in order to be able to get around it. Or they went and stood in lines early to avoid on-the-day voting and avoid the post office. And they said they would crawl over broken glass to vote against it. I'm not remotely surprised, because anyone who really understands his pathology, that's exactly what you would do.
Now,
but most people don't understand the pathology.
The U.S. seems to have some massive issues right now, but there also are other countries that seem to have been popping up a lot, like the UK with the Brexit, France with beheadings, and Azerbaijan with their war against their neighbor, and Peru or something on their third president in a week.
Yep. Oh, well, this is the psychology of contraction is global. It's not just America. Everywhere is sliding into this dysfunctional state. It's part of limits to growth. This is one of the things I was trying to explain about limits to growth when I was lecturing about that. That, for instance, if you're talking about oil, it's nice to know how many barrels of oil you might think are under the ground, but that's not what tells you how many barrels of oil you're going to access. It's the above ground factors that tell you that. Like, is there going to be a civil war in the country that you were hoping to get oil out of? Well, if there is, you're not getting any, no matter what's under there. So when you have massive unrest and disruption, this plays into the whole limits to growth scenario by making it drastically worse. So this is one of the things I've lectured on, is that it's not just the events that determine what happens, it's the human reaction to those events. Because human beings will drastically overreact to events like this every single time. It's completely predictable. So they do things that make the situation drastically worse than it need have been, like believing Trump and then rioting in the streets and turning everything fascist. And that's not going to help anybody. It's going to make everything worse for everyone, but they're doing it anyway. It is really disturbing to see what's going on. I mean, Brexit was orchestrated by the exact same people who put Trump into power, and for the exact same reason, to break up the Western alliance and to give liberal democracy such a bad name that it would be thrown out for a generation at least. probably quite frankly longer than that. So Brexit has had the same backers. Aaron Banks, I think, was the money bags there who vote leave, violated every campaign finance condition. It was completely illegal the way that vote was conducted. But because they won, everything has proceeded this way. But it was a complete fraud on the British nation in the first place, because they were getting people to vote for something that didn't exist. They were telling people, oh, just vote for Brexit and then we'll just be independent again and we'll be away from all of Europe and we'll control our own borders and it'll all be fine. None of that worked out that way. They're still absolutely tied to Europe. They're absolutely embedded in the European legal system. And it's going to be catastrophic for them to leave and to then have different rules on both sides. The trade will be massively disrupted. They'll pitch themselves into an economic depression, absolutely guaranteed. And the mess their politics is in at the moment is just a disaster as well. And Boris Johnson is a complete clown. He's intelligent and well-educated, but he's still a buffoon. He's just doing absolutely awful things for the country, but there's no guarantee that anyone else at this point would be able to do any better, sad to say. And in France has a problem with extremism. So I believe there was a teacher who was beheaded in France for teaching about the Danish cartoons. So this was an extremist. France actually has a large population of extremists, and they're at least partly to blame for that because they radicalize their own Muslim population by treating them so badly. So this is a major problem, that people come in from places like North Africa to France. They are never allowed to become French citizens. It doesn't matter how long they've lived there. Their kids are born there. They're not allowed to be French either. They're considered other. They're basically put in ghettos and the public transport goes right through them. So it's like, well, you can be in our country, but you're not allowed to work or participate in our society in any way, and don't ever think that you're French. And then they wonder why these people don't think that they're French and decide that maybe France has some things to answer for. So France has problems in that regard. And that isn't going to go away anytime soon either. There are other places, Belarus, there's an ongoing massive uprising there because Alexander Lukashenko lost the election in a landslide, but he's done exactly what Trump did, said, I won, and he's just repressing everybody who disagrees. The opposition leaders have had to flee the country. And Putin is supporting Lukashenko because he's trying to rebuild the Soviet Union. He's already invaded Ukraine. Now he's invading Belarus. And the other one you mentioned, now he's invading Armenia and Azerbaijan. So Nagorno-Karabakh is I believe it's an Armenian enclave in Azerbaijan. So this has been fought over for forever. But there's the upwelling of hostilities there. This has huge potential to bring in other actors. It's already brought in Russia and Turkey. It may well bring in the United States. The US could decide to participate in that. Well, Trump could decide, oh, let's just send some people to Armenia. Not because it makes any sense, but hey, it'll make Biden's life even harder. Let's just get involved in yet another foreign conflict that makes no sense and has nothing to do with American interests, just to cause trouble. This is the sort of thing he might actually do. The thing is, malignant narcissists have no conscience, no empathy, literally none. They do not see a distinction in moral terms between blowing their nose and mass murder. It's really hard for ordinary people to put themselves in that kind of mindset because we have consciences. We don't see the world like that. We find it really hard to imagine that someone could be capable of some of the things that these people are in fact capable of. But then when you look at the dictators in history, all the bloodthirsty, horrific things that have happened, and they were done by people with this exact pathology. So this is possible. We just have to learn the lessons of history and recognize what's happening in America at the moment. So the country that's kind of been, well, at least it's seen itself as the beacon of freedom and democracy worldwide. By no means the only place that was free and democratic, but America likes to think of itself as the leader of the free world and all this sort of thing. It's a national myth. It's actually not as correct as people like to think, but nevertheless, there's something to it. And that's the myth that's going to be destroyed over the next while. America is just going to be dragged down into the same issues that have bedeviled every other empire at the end of its days throughout human history. Empires end ignominiously quite often. And this is very much, I think, what we're seeing. So when Spain lost its empire, for instance, I think they were the top of the world in the 17th century. They lost their empire. They turned inwards for 400 years. and became very internally repressive, very religiously internally repressive. So that was the era of the Inquisition and things like that. Unfortunately, I see the future of the US as a combination of Balkanization a la Yugoslavia in the 1990s and the Inquisition under Spain, Spanish rule. That is not a pretty picture. I know it's not. And that doesn't even include COVID. So prepare for some really, really, really hard times. This is not going to be nice, and it's going to go on for years. So people need to find their community and work with their community while everything is going to hell in a handbasket all around them, unfortunately. This was always going to happen. I would have thought, it was originally a thought that this would happen directly as a result of a financial crash. We're still going to have the financial crash, which will feed into all of this as well. But it seems the above ground factors have happened more quickly than even the financial crash was going to happen. So there are various things. So I used to lecture that there are various limiting factors, and you hit one limit, then the next, and then the next, and the next. I had always thought the first limit would be financial. It appears the first limit will be political, then finance, then energy, then climate, then everything else. So there's a lot to work through. The world has changed. You aren't going back to the way it used to be. Normal is gone. That will never be part of people's lives again in the way that it once was. And that's going to require a long period of mourning, I think, for people to really come to terms with that the world has changed. I mean, it's not starting now. It started 4 years ago. Well, it actually started a long time. The groundwork was laid a long time before that, but the real destruction started 4 years ago. And it's going to get exponentially worse over the next while. I don't know how the US is going to deal with COVID from here. The problem is that nobody will follow the public health recommendations at this point. People all think public health recommendations are fascism, when actually they tried to elect fascism. Fascism was what was telling them not to wear masks. Fascism tells you, prove how loyal you are by risking your life for me. That's what this is about. It's about, I'm not weak. I will go out even although I risk my life because I hate weakness more than anything. It's partly that. And it's partly a loyalty test to Trump. It's, if you're loyal to me, you will risk your life by standing in this rally with no mask.
Well,
this
in Michigan,
sort of thing is just horrific.
Michigan was in the news yet again today because last night, Sunday evening, in Michigan, there's a 3-week pause. So this is the Department of Health said, okay, no more in-person college, no more in-person high school, no more sitting inside a restaurant or going to the gym for a class or sitting in a movie theater or doing these various things. So for 3 weeks, starting on the 18th of the month. And so for 3 weeks, but of course, almost instantly on social media, you know, everyone was griping about it, and the Republican legislature was immediately griping about it, even though they're not in session, and even though they didn't come up with any responses at all to the fact that our hospitalization numbers are higher than they were back in the spring.
Absolutely.
So,
does Gretchen Whitmer have a protection detail? Because she needs one.
I certainly hope so, because on certain news stations, you can see that there are people standing outside the Capitol building on Saturday and Sunday every weekend. And one of the people who was on Facebook recently said, well, now maybe was something like, maybe someone will get brave enough and do a better job with that Governor Whitmer, which to me sounded like a veiled threat that...
Oh, it was, absolutely. It wasn't even veiled.
They didn't properly kidnap her before, and...
Did you hear the additional details that came out about that kidnapping plot? They weren't just planning to kidnap her, they were planning to burn down the Capitol with people inside it. They were planning to murder the government of Michigan. This is
I
just
think that's a
insane.
discussion they had a bit earlier,
Yes,
back
exactly. But
in
it just came out
back in
now.
June
They're,
or
they're
July.
discussing it now, but it's something that they plotted at the same time as they were plotting to kidnap her. They were also thinking that maybe they'd just execute the politicians one at a time. But they were saying no one gets out alive. So this, again, this is fascism. This is a coup, an attempted coup. And did you hear what Scott Atlas had to say? Just yesterday, I believe. So Scott Atlas is the doctor. He's a radiologist, I believe. He's not an epidemiologist. He has no business being on the coronavirus task force. He's only there because he thinks herd immunity is the way to go. So he agrees with Trump. Trump puts in there. Scott Atlas came out, I'm trying to think the exact quote. He basically told Michigan to rise up, and if you accept this, you're gone. So he was fomenting sedition. This is sedition. This is a crime, a felony, and it's just happening in plain view. So the person who is supposed to be at the federal level in charge of protecting people against a pandemic is telling the people of Michigan to rise up and overthrow the government that is trying to protect them. This is the sort of stuff that's going on. You might be able to tell that I'm a little bit more worked up than I sometimes am, but this is because these things are incredibly important, and people do not understand what's happening. But I am doing everything I possibly can to get through to people about this, because there's nothing more important that's happened in your country in your entire lives. This is going to change the way you live, the way your entire country operates. And you have to be aware of this, because otherwise people will be completely wrong-footed and they won't be able to do anything about it if it's too late. And that would be so sad. And I just find it's absolutely tragic what's happening. I mean, a whole country is tearing itself apart. And it won't just be the United States. I mean, for instance, in Denmark over the weekend, they had imposed new COVID restrictions. There's a mutation, a COVID mutation that seems to have emerged in mink. They're going to slaughter all the mink in Denmark, but they're trying to bring in a new level of lockdown temporarily while they figure out what's going on and where this mutation has gone, so that they can get a handle on it and try and make sure that it doesn't spread.
Sure.
Even the people in Denmark don't understand this either. I think there's so much pandemic fatigue that people are just starting to say, no more lockdowns, even if we might die. So people in Denmark spent the whole weekend standing outside the parliament, banging on pots and pans until the government dropped its recommendations. So now this mink mutation might just spread all over Europe, and there'll be nothing anyone can do about it. People can only cope with emergency situations for a certain amount of time. If it drags on too long, they just can't stand it anymore, and they will just go back to doing what they did anyway. And so the failure in the States has been so comprehensive that it's just dragged on for such a ridiculous amount of time that everybody has pandemic fatigue. The way to deal with a pandemic is exactly what we did in New Zealand. You go early, you go hard, you lock everything down for a month. You find out where every single case is, you quarantine them all, you close the borders, you prevent new cases from coming in, you absolutely contact trace everything. And once you've got it down to teeny weeny little numbers of cases, you watch it like a hawk. Every time something pops up, you step on it right away so it never spreads. You never get back into community transmission. That's how we're managing it here. And our lives are normal. They have been for months. Now, we have another couple of cases, a couple in Auckland, a couple in Wellington. So we will now be told you will be wearing masks on the train, which we will absolutely do, and no one will complain. And we might photograph little QR codes on storefronts to say we've been here in case there needs to be any contact tracing. I have zero problem with any of that. I completely trust Jacinda Ardern. I wouldn't. There are many political leaders I would not trust to be handed additional central powers. Her, I would trust. She's doing it for the right reasons. She's doing it exactly the right way. This will not be permanent. It will not be a step towards fascism or totalitarianism or communism or anything like that. So it's fine. This is the way you deal with it. Taiwan has done an even better job. I think they only had like
You
6
maybe have
deaths.
space on the South Island there where we could maybe just send all the Trumpies there.
Oh no, the South Island is gorgeous. We would not ever pollute it with Trumpies. But it is polluted with Peter Thiel, unfortunately. So Peter Thiel, Mr. Google, and Mr. Palantir, more money than God, he bought his citizenship in New Zealand. So he has an estate down by Queenstown. And Palantir is absolutely evil. He's just an awful, awful person. He doesn't think women should be allowed to vote, for instance. I think might be partly because he's gay, but he really doesn't think much of women. Like, women are just not part of his life in any way. I think he reckons that women are just a bunch of silly creatures who should be looked to as sort of higher animals of some kind. But he doesn't think women should be allowed to vote because he thinks that that would disrupt the natural male organization of things. And this person bought his citizenship in our country. I hate this, but
well, maybe we can invite the Trumpies to move to Queensland or the Outback or somewhere.
I mean, Antarctica or something where they can't hurt anybody else.
Western Sahara. There should be space there. I hear it's very warm, sunny.
Yeah, and there's an insurrection going on there too. So Western Sahara was taken over by Morocco some years ago, and now there's an uprising there against Moroccan rule.
Well, the eastern horn of Africa, then Eritrea or Ethiopia or somewhere.
As for Trump himself, he needs to go to jail. He really does. He has committed hundreds and hundreds of felonies, an awful lot of them in absolutely plain view. You don't even really need a trial. It's obvious. He just did it, and he even told people he did it. So there are so many things he should be convicted for. So he really should have his passport confiscated immediately after the inauguration. He should be arrested, he should be denied bail, and he should go on trial as soon as possible. Mind you, that will be politically extremely difficult, because as much as he deserves it, that's going to look like political retribution to his followers. This is another reason that he's getting them all worked up now, to make it politically impossible to prosecute him for all his crimes. So there is a lot of method to his madness. Like, he's not a genius, but he's not an idiot either. He's very, very cunning and very, very evil, and will absolutely impose every evil scheme he can possibly think of on people. And some of them, it's not that he thinks them all out himself. There's a team of people who are equally evil, but there are all these plots that they're putting in just to try and screw things up as much as they possibly can. It is so tragic to watch this unfold.
Well, I think that's a good full hour we got there, Nicole. Why don't we let the viewers take all this in and continue paying attention to what all is going on in the world? Before we sign off, any last thoughts about all what's going on?
I really hope people can hold together in community, because if people allow everything to divide, then things fall apart so much more quickly. People need to come together, preferably across the tribal lines. But if you can't achieve that, at least have a solid community within your own broader tribe so that you can work together and get through things. And if the tribes can ignore each other as much as possible, then that would be a good thing too. So it would be a wonderful thing if those tribes could just say, okay, well, we hate you, but we'll stay over here and you stay over there. And then maybe bad things don't have to happen to quite the same extent. I really worry that there's a lot of provocation that's coming out of the MAGA crowd at the moment. And if people respond to that with violence, Trump will declare martial law. That would be one of the ways that he could prevent the electors from being seated, for instance. So that's probably another aspect of what he's trying to do. Don't fall for it. Do not take them on. Just ignore them, and they will eventually go away when he has to leave. When you remove the source of the mental illness, a lot of the people who had become part of the cult of personality will snap out of it. So there is a way to reach these people, but you have to take away the cause of the problem. So if Trump is removed and not allowed to become a media personality because he's in jail, then people can start to heal. The country can start to come back down again from the kind of high temperature that it is now. But it won't be easy, because what you have now is a solid base of 17 million people who voted for fascism. And they're not going away, even if Trump is going away. Their number will reduce. If Trump is removed, that number of people will reduce. but it may still remain a critical mass. It's a pretty significant minority of people. And they absolutely do not understand the way the situation really works, because all they watch is Fox News. They've been told lies all the time. These people do not know what the situation actually is. They don't think COVID is real. They think Biden is a communist. All this crap they've been fed all this time. This is what they believe. If they're actually exposed to the truth eventually, and the cause of the pathology is removed, then maybe the temperature can go down. Maybe they won't support fascism as much. But the United States has a major fascism problem on its hands. It almost went there in the 30s. If Charles Lindbergh had won instead of FDR, the United States would have been fascist in the 1930s, and it would have gone to war on the side of Hitler. You almost did it before as a country. And there is a very real risk that it will happen again. So this is just something to absolutely be aware of, and to try not to foment any kind of unrest, de-escalate wherever possible, try and concentrate on the positive aspects, the community building aspects, wherever you can. It's hard right now with COVID, hard to get together, but even if people can only do it virtually, it's better than absolutely nothing. But it's going to be tough. I'm not going to pull my punches. It is going to be tough, and it's going to be tough for years. But people can find inner depths of strength within themselves. You know, they did it in the UK. And you think of how they got through the Blitz and things like that. It can be done.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for all your time again today. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe and put in a comment. And thank you for joining us. Take care, and we hope to see you in the future. Bye-bye.
Absolutely.